The Nightingale, Hans Christian Andersen. The story I'm going to tell you happened a great many years ago, so it is good to hear it now before it is forgotten. The Emperor's palace in China was the most beautiful in the world. It was made entirely of porcelain and very costly, but so delicate and brittle that whoever touched it had to be very careful. The garden was beautiful too, with unusual flowers and tiny silver bells tied to them, which tinkled so that everyone who passed could not help noticing the flowers. Indeed, everything in the Emperor's garden was remarkable. But those who traveled beyond the garden knew that there was a forest with tall trees. In one of these trees lived a nightingale who sang so beautifully that even the poor fishermen, who had so many other things to do, would stop and listen. Travelers from every country in the world came to the city of the emperor, which they admired very much. But when they heard the nightingale, they all said that it was the best of all. The travelers wrote books containing descriptions of the town, the palace, and the gardens. But they did not forget the nightingale. The books traveled all over the world, and some of them came into the hands of the emperor. He sat in his golden chair, and as he read, he nodded his approval, for it pleased him to find such a beautiful description of his city, his palace, and his gardens. But when he came to the words, "The nightingale is the most beautiful of all," he exclaimed, "What is this? I know nothing of any nightingale. Is there such a bird in my empire? I have never heard of it. But where was the nightingale to be found?" The noblemen went through halls and passages of the palace, yet nobody had heard of the bird. At last they met a girl in the kitchen who agreed to take the noblemen to see the nightingale in the woods. "There she is," said the girl. "And there she sits," she added, pointing to a little gray bird who was perched on a bough. "Is it possible?" said the nobleman. "I never imagined it would be a little plain, simple thing like that." "Little nightingale," cried the girl, raising her voice, "our most gracious emperor wishes you to sing before him." "With the greatest pleasure," said the nightingale, and began to sing most delightfully. "It sounds like tiny glass bells," said the nobleman. "I had the great pleasure of inviting you to a court festival this evening, dear bird." The palace was decorated for the occasion. In the center of the great hall, a golden perch had been fixed for the nightingale to sit on. The nightingale sang so sweetly that tears came into the emperor's eyes and then rolled down his cheeks. The emperor was delighted. She was now to live in the court, to have her own cage. She was allowed to go out twice a day and once during the night. 12 servants were appointed to attend her on these occasions, who each held her by a silken string fastened to her leg. There was certainly not much pleasure flying in such manner. One day the emperor received a large packet on which was written, "The Nightingale." It was a work of art, an artificial nightingale made to look like a living one, and covered all over with diamonds, rubies, and sapphires. As soon as the artificial bird was wound up, it sang like the real one. "Now they must sing together," said the court, "and what a duet it will be." But they did not get on well, for the real nightingale sang in its own natural way, but the artificial bird sang only waltz. 33 times did the mechanical bird sing the same tunes without being tired. The people would gladly have heard it again, but the emperor said the living nightingale ought to sing something. But where was she? No one had noticed her when she flew out at the open window back to her own green woods. Everyone agreed that the mechanical bird was much better than the real bird. But the real nightingale We can never tell what is going to be sung. But with the mechanical bird, everything was definite and settled. A few years passed. One evening, the artificial bird was singing beautifully, and the emperor was lying in the bed listening to it. Just then, something inside the bird sounded whiz. Then a spring cracked, whir. Went all the wheels running round, and then the music stopped. In panic, everyone sent for a watchmaker. After a lot of tests, the watchmaker said that the barrels were worn out. The bird could only be allowed to play once a year. Time passed, and then a real grief came upon the land. The emperor was ill. Doctors came from far and near, but could not cure the emperor's illness. One night, the emperor was lying on his royal bed, cold and pale. Suddenly, there came through the open window the sound of sweet music. Outside, on the bough of a tree, sat the living Nightingale. She had heard of the emperor's illness and had come to sing to him songs of hope and life. And as she sung, the blood in the emperor's veins started flowing more rapidly and gave life to his weak limbs. The emperor fell into a sweet sleep, and how mild and refreshing that slumber was. When he awoke, full of strength, the sun shone brightly through the window. The servants came in to look after the dead emperor, when lo, there he stood, and to their astonishment said, "Good morning."